My thoughts on the Sean McDermott article, an injury update with banged up Bills, and my 5 predictions for Sunday against the Chiefs are coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. A few minutes ago, I placed my very own DoorDash order to get my favorite local meal from El Vallarta here in Charlotte. Should be here before the show is over, so a big thank you to DoorDash for lunch. Place your order today using promo code LOCK23. Stay tuned later in the episode to hear more from our friends at DoorDash. Well, folks, this is our last conversation before the Bills will face the Chiefs on Sunday afternoon. And we're going to start by giving you my reaction to the Ty Dunn article. Then I'm going to talk to Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills about the injuries for the Bills coming out of the bye and into this Chiefs game. And then, of course, my 5 predictions for Sunday. But let's start with this latest on Sean McDermott. And Ty Dunn, who owns a subscription-based football media company called Go Long that specializes in long-form stories, wrote a 20,000-word article that uses 25 sources titled The McDermott Problem. Now, before I offer my thoughts on this, I want to remind you of the conversations I've had with you on McDermott over the last several weeks. I've been deeply critical of McDermott. I've said that I don't trust him in high-leverage situations to do the right things. I've said that I'm tired of his coaching blunders, and I've even said I'd like to see him replaced. I simultaneously don't believe the Bills will move on from McDermott, and I certainly don't expect them to move on from McDermott. Now, back to Ty's story, and within it, he details several stories and descriptions of McDermott that expose his tendencies and his tactics, which paints him as a massive stumbling block for the Bills to achieve the highest levels of success. The piece of the article that has received the most publicity, and McDermott even took time on Thursday to address it, was back in training camp in 2019 during a team meeting. McDermott was attempting to discuss the importance of communication, and he very foolishly referenced the terrorist attacks of 9/11 to emphasize communication and the coordination that was necessary to pull that off. There's no defending that. It was ill-advised, it was a poor choice, and by all accounts, including from McDermott, it was immediately addressed and he apologized to the team. Clearly a mistake, and a mistake that over 3 years later, the entire world now knows about and is going to have a lasting impact on the general perception of Sean McDermott. Now, fast forward to present day, and Ty's story brings this back to light, in addition to a host of other damning accounts that paint McDermott in a very poor light. So what are my thoughts on this? Well, number one, none of it really surprises me. I think a lot of what was shared by Ty shows up in how the team performs, and in many ways is the root of my frustrations with McDermott before the story was even published. Number two, I think it's important to acknowledge that this isn't Ty's first hit piece on McDermott. And Ty's been critical of McDermott for several years, and I think it's very fair to consider the timing and the intent of the article. Number three, balancing the success with the blunders is challenging when it comes to McDermott. Got the team out of the drought. Highest win percentage of any coach in team history. 3 consecutive AFC East championships. They've won a playoff game in each of the last 3 seasons. One of only 2 teams to do that. They're one of only 3 teams in the NFL to have a winning record in each of the last 3 seasons. There's been a lot of good. So balancing that with the blunders is what makes the McDermott conversation challenging. And I generally think Sean McDermott is a good man with good intent. My issues with Sean McDermott are along the lines of benching Tyrod Taylor for Nathan Peterman in the middle of a playoff run, punting that season, 2017 season, in overtime against the Colts in that snow game, and you're playing for a tie when facing elimination back in 2017. The hiring of Rick Dennison to be the offensive coordinator who runs a West Coast style of offense and forcing Tyrod Taylor to operate in that system. Blowing a 16-point second-half lead in the playoffs against the Texans. Blowing a 2-score lead against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. The overall inconsistent nature of the team back in 2021 that cost the Bills the number 1 seed in the playoffs, whether it's losing to the 2 and whatever Jaguars. There's a lot of blunders along the way that season. 13 seconds. Getting punked by the Bengals at home in the playoffs last year. This year, losing to the Jets and Patriots. Fumbling the entire London trip that led to the Jags loss. Having catastrophic losses to the Broncos and Eagles that were a direct result of coaching blunders. And then being blitz aggressive against Joe Burrow and losing that game. That's where I'm frustrated. That's what I point to. I don't have the sources Ty has. I can't validate or dispute anything that he wrote in that article, but what I can tell you is that's the stuff that annoys me when it comes to Sean McDermott. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, the question I'm asking myself, and maybe some of you are, is what is the actual impact of this article on the team right now? And the answer is probably none. Is it a distraction? I don't know. We're talking about it. Social media is losing its mind over it. But I think this is a Bills team that is preparing to play a really important football game. And I don't think the results of the game will be dictated in any way by the article. I mean, ideally, this will galvanize McDermott and the team. The bottom line is this. If the Bills lose to Kansas City, are we really going to credit the release of the article for the loss, or will it just be the inconsistencies that have plagued the football team that currently sits at 6-6 and the number 11 seed in the AFC playoff race entering the game? A lot of dynamics at play here, folks. And obviously, it's all very disappointing. And maybe the reason the Bills are 6-6 and on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoff picture is a lot of what Ty exposed in the article. And I know that many of you expected me to have some thoughts on this, and so I wanted to open up our final conversation before the Chiefs with my analysis and perspective on that article. All right, folks, we're talking injuries here in just a moment, and of course, my 5 predictions for Sunday, all coming up here as we move along this discussion. But folks, I got to tell you what, I am obsessed with DoorDash. The convenience is unmatched, especially in my busy life, right? We're all busy. We're all trying to figure out what's for dinner, when we're going to have time to make dinner, when we're going to get to the grocery store. You don't have to worry about that anymore. DoorDash can handle that for you. In fact, you know what we got right here? A little DoorDash bag by El Vallarta. Best tacos in town. Best chips and salsa in town. Love it. Bringing it right to my front door. They'll bring you groceries right to your front door. They'll bring you food from your favorite local restaurants right to your front door. Heck, if you want a snack from the gas station, they'll pick it up and bring it to you right to your front door. It's an amazing service that gives me time, right? I mean, what's more valuable than time? Not having to worry about those things. So check out DoorDash. We got a deal here for you. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Subject to change. Terms apply. Again, that's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23. Subject to change. Terms apply. I'm joined now by Kyle Trimble. He's a doctor of physical therapy. He runs Banged Up Bills. You can follow him on Twitter at Banged Up Bills, and he joins us each week to get us ready for the upcoming Bills game from an injury perspective. And the Bills are coming out of the bye, and they're looking pretty good in terms of health. In fact, no players that are currently on the active roster have any type of a game day designation, but there are two players that are pretty interesting because the Bills opened the 21-day window to return from injured reserve for both cornerback Kaiir Elam and tight end Dawson Knox. So I want to start there. Then we're going to get into the Chiefs, who have some players ruled out and a player that may play that's interesting. So we got a lot to cover here, but I want to start with Dawson Knox. Bills tight end, wrist injury, has been on injured reserve, and he practiced in full all week. And as of the recording of this, he hasn't been activated. But Sean McDermott certainly indicated that there's a chance that could happen. Are you feeling like Dawson Knox is going to be good to go for Sunday against Kansas City?
Absolutely. This fits in the timeline, which I had projected when he suffered not necessarily suffered the injury, but when he underwent surgery. With the research I found, it was going to be about a 4 or 6 week time frame. Dawson even said himself he was pushing to play against Philadelphia, and they said, now let's give it another 2 weeks there, which I think is going to be beneficial with any injury. So barring some type of crazy setback, he should be playing on Sunday, which is a great addition for the Bills, especially get back to that 12 personnel. Just a quick recap for what Dawson had happened. He suffered the injury in week 5. He had a helmet hit his wrist late in the Jaguars game. Had taped it up and tried to play through that and couldn't really block. Could kind of catch, though some fans are questionable about his catching abilities in the first place. They found that it wasn't getting any better, underwent surgery. I had suspected he suffered a scapholunate ligament tear, at least a partial one, and then possibly a TFCC tear, which is on the ulnar aspect of the wrist. So that can just affect some of the clicking, catching, ability to grip the football and whatnot. So they went and probably cleaned all that stuff up, stabilized it, and there's timelines to support that. So it's good to see that we've seen that him come back and be ready to go because he's got a welcome addition, especially from an offensive perspective.
Yeah, his blocking ability, I think adding another option at tight end for Josh Allen will be helpful for this offense as it looks to go on a run. I know that there's some fan frustration out there with Dawson Knox, and the drops were very real, but also playing through a very real wrist injury. And just think back to last year when the Bills played in Kansas City. The guy caught the game-winning touchdown pass. So I'm excited to see what Joe Brady can do with this Kincaid-Knox duo at tight end. Something I probably should have mentioned before we got here is that I am recording this segment with Dr. Kyle Trimble from a cabin in the woods of the North Carolina mountains. So if I look and sound a little bit different for this part of it, well, that's why. Let's talk about Kaiir Elam. Ankle injury. Kind of an interesting overall situation as it relates to Kaiir Elam. Sean McDermott didn't really indicate that he was as likely to play against the Chiefs as Knox, but can you kind of catch us up with Kaiir Elam and maybe when he could return?
Elam's a true question mark because I think the team has been hiding more behind injury than anything else there. I do know that it was a legitimate ankle injury. I do know that it dated back to the preseason. And based on what we knew from that, it sounded like it was more like a bone bruise. And bone bruises can tend to linger and just really never get better. And you keep playing on it and just kind of keep aggravating everything. So they finally said, let's hit a reset button, try to get you right, and maybe get you activated for later on in the season when we still need depth, especially as more injuries happen. So as to when he comes back, it's going to come down to the corresponding roster move. We've talked about this with plenty of other players. You don't cut somebody just because he's a first-round pick. I mean, if he was one of the great players like we saw with Von Miller, though we've had issues with him, or, Dawson Knox or whoever else there, sure, you cut somebody that's 53rd guy on the roster, but I think you wait till an injury and then get him back up there and get him back up to speed. But that's the nice thing about the injury reserve window with the 21-day practice window and whatnot. They don't have to rush him back immediately, and we'll just wait and see what happens.
2 follow-ups there. First of all, on the 21-day window, the team has 21 days where this player can practice, and after 21 days, if they're not activated, they're out for the season. So just so people understand that point of information there. Another note on bone bruises, you hear Chiefs people talking about Travis Kelce and his bone bruise and say that, hey, that's still lingering on him right now, despite him, not really missing any time or anything like that. it's definitely something that he's playing through. So kind of maybe some parallels there, but obviously a 75% Travis Kelce is something that this Chiefs offense needs. Now let's focus a little bit more on the Chiefs. They have some significant players ruled out. Starting left tackle Donovan Smith out. Starting running back Isaiah Pacheco out. I think that's a big one there with what he can do for this offense to kind of give it something to lean into, as their passing game has not been very consistent this year. Starting safety Brian Cook out. Drew Tranquil, backup middle linebacker, out. But Nick Bolton, who's typically their starting middle linebacker, might play in this game. He's been on injured reserve with a wrist injury, and as of the recording of this, we're not sure if he's going to play. I've heard some people say that if he were to play, it's a little bit early based on the timeline for the injury. Fill us in on Nick Bolton.
So Bolton, he suffered a left dislocated wrist back against, I believe, the Chargers. He was trying to make a tackle, and just the way the wrist hit when it was changed between the player and the ground, it dislocated the wrist. So what happened is, just like Dawson Knox we talked about earlier, he tore the scapholunate ligament, but that fully tore compared to Dawson's likely partial tear. So dislocated wrists are pretty significant. We saw how much of an issue it was with former Bills edge linebacker Shane Ray, who missed several seasons when he was the Denver Broncos. So his was an extreme case, of course, but Bolton got the surgery, was projected to be out about 2 months. He beat it by, I think, about 2 weeks here. And they're talking about him playing with a cast or club, which wouldn't be uncommon. This is why we can see him play and beat that timeline, as if, because you don't have to have your hands to play linebacker. I mean, you're going to need to wrap guys up, but you can kind of get a club around there and still be somewhat effective. If this was offensive player, we wouldn't see him coming back. And in fact, that's why we're not expecting to see Joe Burrow back this year, because he also suffered a similar injury several weeks ago. And, there wasn't any expectation he'd be coming back. So I don't see why Nick Bolton wouldn't come back this week, especially since, the Drew Tranquil is going to be out. But if you got a guy who can't use one arm effectively, this is an opportunity to really hit that secondary, not secondary, but the second level of the defense and try to attack it, with especially so much interchangeable pieces in there with all the different injuries they've had. Because they've also had Darius Harris working through a wrist injury, though he's practices a full, missing Drew Tranquil. They have a lot of younger guys. So this opportunity for the Bills to take advantage, even Nick Bolton being back.
Yeah, it's a heck of a decision to decide between one-armed Nick Bolton or Jack Conklin, their third-string middle linebacker. So big decision for the Chiefs that we'll obviously be paying attention to as we lead up until kickoff. Dr. Kyle Trimble, as always, thanks for joining us. Bills are looking pretty healthy coming out of the bye. Of course, not to mention Nyheim Hines and Daquan Jones and Matt Milano and Trey White. But for where they are right now and based on the players that could be available, the Bills are looking pretty good coming out of the bye. Need to go on a run, need to stay healthy. Hopefully we have just as little to talk about next week as the Bills get ready for the Cowboys.
Absolutely. Go Bills.
Folks, you got to check out Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the funnest, most exciting, easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. The format is incredible. It's just you against the numbers. It's not you against thousands of other players, including pros, including sharks. It's just you against numbers. Here's what happens. You select 2 or more players. You pick more or less in their projected stats. You place your entry. That's it. Doesn't take long. Picks can be made in under a minute. And then when you win, the withdrawals are super, super quick. I also love with Prize Picks, you could cross-pollinate between sports. So if there's some football stuff you want to get into, pick more or less on some projections there. Hockey, basketball, whatever you want, you can kind of put it all together to place the entry that you really love. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, folks, it is prediction time here on the podcast. But first, I would like to extend an invitation to you to join the Locked On Bills subtext community. We are having a lot of fun with it. We've been doing it for several months now, and I've really enjoyed it. So here's what you get with the subtext subscription. Well, you get one-on-one text messaging with me. So you have questions about the Bills, you have thoughts, whatever, you can text me, and we'll talk Buffalo Bills football. You also get my first reaction to all major Bills news, and you get my live in-game text. So when the Bills are playing the Chiefs on Sunday, about after every drive, I will send out thoughts, what I'm seeing, what I'm hoping to see throughout the course of the game. So check it out. There's a link in today's show notes to join. And we also have a Discord channel that goes with our subtext subscription. And in the Discord channel, it's hundreds of Bills fans. We're talking Bills, Sabres, NFL draft. We got some fitness conversation, some life conversation, having fun. But there's also a film clips channel in there. So when I do my all 22 review, all day long on Monday, I post clips of the film with me talking about what's happening on plays that stand out to me, and people have really, really enjoyed that. So check that out. That's in addition to a subtext subscription. Also, I have made the Discord available to the international audience. International audience, unfortunately, subtext does not have it set up for you to be part of that, but you can be part of our Discord community. If you'd like to join, send me an email, joemarino65@gmail.com. I'll get you all the information to join just the Discord. If you'd like to join the subtext, there's a link in today's show notes. So if you're on YouTube, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, click on the show notes. You'll see a link to join the subtext community. We're having fun. We'd love for you to be a part of it. All right, prediction time. Got 5 of those for you here today. Number 1, I predict that neither quarterback will be sacked more than twice. So Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, neither gets sacked more than 2 times. And the deal here that makes this an interesting prediction is that these are 2 defenses, the Bills and the Chiefs, that are very good at getting sacks. The Bills are number 1 in the NFL in sack rate. 9.5% of pass plays end in a sack. That's best in the league. Number 3 is the Chiefs, 9.3%. So these are 2 teams that are very good at sacking opposing quarterbacks, but these are also 2 quarterbacks that are very good at not getting sacked. And despite facing reasonable amounts of pressure, both are very good at not getting sacked. And I think despite, kind of what the other games this season have showed us, that both of these defenses can get sacks, I don't think either quarterback goes down more than twice. Number 2 is I think the Bills will have more rushing yards than the Chiefs. And I think running the ball is going to be important here. I know that we're Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, haymakers, points, right? Last year it was 24-20. And I think you will see plenty of passing game production. But I think running the ball might be even more important in this game. The Chiefs, as I mentioned, they're 28th in the NFL in yards per carry allowed against their run defense. They've allowed 100 yards or more to 7 consecutive opponents. I think the Bills will be the 8th. And I think the Bills have found some success running the ball recently with some of the recent performances against Denver, against the Jets. I think situationally they ran the ball well against the Eagles and had a lot of yards actually rushing the ball against the Eagles. I think that translates against Kansas City, and the Bills end up with more rushing yards than the Chiefs. The next 2, I'm going to give you some FanDuel overs that I like. So you can go to FanDuel and you can bet on these yourself. The first one, Dalton Kincaid. They have him at 36.5 receiving yards, smashing the over there. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities in the middle of the field. The Chiefs will be down to a backup safety, and then their linebacker situation is going to be kind of interesting. We'll see if Nick Bolton can go. But regardless, I think Dalton Kincaid is going to have some production in this game. And what's a little bit hot takey about that is the Chiefs have been very good this year at limiting tight end production. In fact, they're 4th in the NFL in terms of the fewest receiving yards allowed to tight ends this season, 4th fewest. And I think that Dalton Kincaid gets over 36.5 receiving yards against Kansas City. I also like the over on James Cook. They have his receiving yards at 19.5. I think he will top that in this game. And just like I just shared about the Chiefs and defending tight ends and not allowing production there, same deal when it comes to receiving yards against running backs. In fact, they're even better. They're 2nd fewest in the NFL in receiving yards allowed to running backs. But I think James Cook will top 19.5 receiving yards. And then lastly, do I think the Bills will win this game or do I think they lose this game? And I've not really given you too many indicators this week to let you know exactly where I fall on this game. And I know I picked the Bills to lose a couple times recently, and I've been right about that. I don't think the Bills lose this game. I think they're going to win it. Sean McDermott, 6-0 coming out of a bye. Now, I've certainly spent time in years past talking about that record being really good, but the performance of the team being kind of sloppy. But I think this is a desperate football team. I think that their backs are against the wall. They've won the last 2 years during the regular season in Kansas City. And I think they come out punching, and I think they get a win. I think the Chiefs' formula this year actually favors the Bills, right? They play good defense. They try to run the football, and they have some inefficiency in the passing game. I think that plays into the Bills and the style of game that's going to allow them to go get a win. Now, could I be wrong about this? Absolutely. It's Patrick Mahomes at Arrowhead, right? Like, that's tough, right? He's 72-20 in his career as a starting quarterback, right? I mean, he's tough to beat. But I think this Bills team coming out of the bye healthy, right? They hadn't been this healthy in a long time. Desperate. I think they're going to come out swinging, and I think Josh Allen is ready to go on a run. I think he started the run. I think the last 2 games you've seen Josh Allen really elevate himself. I think that continues. He's coming off of some rest here. I think the Bills get this done. I think they come out of Arrowhead 7-6, and we'll talk about the Dallas Cowboys and the Bills stacking wins and if they can really do this thing. But I think they accomplish step 1, which is beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead, and that's my prediction. I'm calling a Bills win on Sunday afternoon. All right, folks, so there you have it. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this week and last week, right? We're coming out of that catastrophic Eagles loss into a bye week, fit in some extra content, had some good big picture conversations. Of course, feel like we did a pretty good job here getting ready for this Chiefs game as well. So join me after the game. We'll be live on Bleacher Report per usual, and then, of course, my post-game coverage all week here on Locked On Bills. Join the subtext community. Get in that Discord channel. Let's have some fun together as we build community and cover the Buffalo Bills. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Have a great weekend. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again after the game.